Welcome once again to Bio 211, the Plant Physiology, Unit 2, Session 1, Respiration. And by the end of this session, students should be able to explain whether plants breathe or not. Describe how plants obtain oxygen for respiration. Describe the structures used in breathing. Determine the types and number of stomata in a leaf, and conduct experiments to determine that plants produce oxygen in the daytime. Before we look at how plants breathe, let us try and answer the question, do plants breathe? Before you read on, please write down your answer in a jotter. Now let us continue. The answer is yes and no. Remember that breathing and respiring are two different things. Mammals, including human beings, breathe by using muscles to pull air into the lungs and push it out, which brings oxygen to the blood and gets rid of carbon dioxide. The blood takes the breathed in oxygen around the body where it is used by the cells and takes waste carbon dioxide back to the lungs where it is breathed out. So the process of cells using oxygen and getting rid of carbon dioxide is called respiration. Plants have very small holes on the underneath of leaves called stomata, which let the carbon dioxide and oxygen in and out in a process called diffusion. We must know that plant cells respire as well. They use oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, just as in mammals. Plants also use carbon dioxide when they synthesize organic matter, such as glucose, using the sun's energy, as we studied in Unit 1. This process called photosynthesis also leads to the production of oxygen. During the day, plant cells photosynthesize more than they respire, so they get rid of more oxygen than carbon dioxide. The reverse happens during the night. Plant cells respire more than they photosynthesize in the night. Hence, they get rid of more carbon dioxide than oxygen. Do you know that some people think that they should not keep plants in bedrooms at night in case the plants use up all the oxygen? Now, you should know that the amount of oxygen used by plants in the night is too small to make any difference in the oxygen levels in bedrooms. Therefore, do not be afraid to keep indoor plants in your bedrooms. The main plant organ used for breathing are the stomata. The stomata or stoma, these are small openings or pores, usually on the lower surfaces of leaves. Stomata have guard cells that open when they are turgid, that is swollen with uptake of water, and close when they are flaccid, that is when they lose water, so that the plant does not lose too much water. This indicates that three gaseous substances can pass through the stomata: water vapor, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. Stomata may be visible under a microscope. You can observe stomata by some simple experiments. So for example, you can take a leaf, hold it the right way up, then fold it in half downwards until it cracks, and peel a piece of the thin skin, the epidermis, from the bottom. Then try it again with a piece of epidermis from the top. After this, observe under a microscope to examine whether there are more stomata on the upper surface or lower surface of a leaf. If this is done with different species of plants, we can also determine whether stomata look different in different kinds of leaves, and if there are different numbers of stomata in different kinds of leaves as well. Another way to look at stomata is to paint a small area, for example, a square centimeter, with clear nail varnish. Let it dry. Cover it with a larger piece of clear sticky tape and then carefully peel it off. The nail varnish will have an imprint of the stomata. Try this on the top and the bottom of a leaf and observe. To see what the stomata do, cover one leaf on a plant with a thick layer of petroleum jelly on the top and another with a thick layer on the bottom, and watch the leaves for a week. What happens to the leaf? Note this in your jotter and bring it to the face-to-face session for discussion. An experiment to determine that oxygen is produced by green plants. A plant called Eloidia canadensis can be used. It is a pondweed which is sold in many pet shops and tropical fish shops because it produces so much oxygen during photosynthesis. It helps to oxygenate the water in fish tanks instead of one aerating the pond using an electric device. You follow these steps. 1. You fill a tank or a glass bowl with water and leave it out for a couple of days to get rid of any chlorine. Put a small bunch of pondweed in the tank. Lower a glass jar into the tank and let it fill with water. Then put it upside down over the pondweed. Leave the tank in the sun and count the bubbles that come off the pondweed over a 5-minute period. Observe how much oxygen collects at the top of the jar in a day. Try the experiment in a light place, but out of direct sun and in the dark. Observe the number of bubbles and the amount of oxygen produced again. Does it affect the amount of gas produced? If there is gas produced in the dark, do you think this is oxygen or carbon dioxide? Plants do breathe. Plants give out carbon dioxide and absorb oxygen from the air that surrounds them. Their tissues respire just as animal tissues do. However, plants do not have lungs or a circulatory system. Therefore, we cannot say that they breathe in the same way as animals. We also have to be careful when studying green plants. This is because in the light, the green parts of these plants carry out photosynthesis as well as respiration. Photosynthesis does the opposite of respiration. Carbon dioxide is absorbed and oxygen is produced. In order to study respiration in green plants, we must block out the light because although green plants respire all the time, they only photosynthesize in the light. Remember that a green plant respires all the time, day and night. A green plant photosynthesizes only in the presence of sunlight naturally. All parts of the plant respire: the leaves, the stem, the roots, and even the flowers. The parts above the soil get their oxygen directly from the air through pores. The pores in the leaves are the stomata. The pores in the branches of trees are called lenticles. Pneumatophores, aerial roots of some mangrove trees, also use lenticles for gaseous exchange. The average number of stomata per square millimeter of leaf is around 300. The smallest number is found on tradescentia leaves, which have 14 per millimeter squared. The highest number of stomata is found on the leaves of the Spanish oak tree, which has about 1,200 per millimeter squared. In the exercise you performed, how many stomata did you observe per millimeter squared? The roots of plants also need oxygen. Plant roots obtain oxygen from the air spaces in the soil. Therefore, if you supply too much water to a potted plant, that is, a plant in a pot, you could kill the roots by drowning them. However, plants such as rice, which normally grow in wet soil, often have air spaces in their roots. This enables rice plants to carry air from the atmosphere down to the root tips so that the roots too can respire underwater. All plants and animals on earth engage in respiration. Respiration combines oxygen and the food synthesized during photosynthesis to produce usable energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate. One of the byproducts of respiration is carbon dioxide. During the night, plants consume oxygen, but they don't release any as during the day when they are photosynthesizing. By using the energy of sunlight, plants can convert carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates and release oxygen in the process of photosynthesis, as shown in the equation below. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll will give us carbohydrates and oxygen, which is given off to the atmosphere. So the equation shows that plants produce oxygen because when they photosynthesize, they take carbon dioxide and water and combine them using light energy absorbed by chlorophyll to produce sugars and oxygen. This stores the energy in chemical bonds in the sugars and releases oxygen. As photosynthesis requires sunlight, this process only happens during the day. We often like to think of this as plants breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen. However, the process is not exactly this simple. Just like animals, plants need to break down carbohydrates into energy, as stated earlier. Oxygen is required to do this. One may ask, why then do plants get rid of all the oxygen they produce during photosynthesis? The answer is they do not release all the oxygen produced during photosynthesis. Plants actually hold on to a small amount of oxygen they produce during photosynthesis and use that oxygen to break down carbohydrates to give them energy. So what happens at night when there is no sunlight, which is needed in photosynthesis? In order to maintain their metabolism and continue respiration at night, plants must absorb oxygen from the air and give off carbon dioxide, which is exactly what animals do. This allows them to respire all day and all night. Fortunately for all of us oxygen breathers, plants produce approximately 10 times more oxygen during the day than what they consume at night. Hence, there is enough oxygen for both plants and animals to use during both day and night for respiration. Now, you should know that plants break down sugar to release energy using the same processes that we do. Oxygen is needed to break down the sugar into carbon dioxide, releasing energy the plants can use to stay alive. However, plants also take in energy from the sun and use it to make sugar, a step that converts carbon dioxide to oxygen. Plants use the carbon in carbon dioxide to build the sugar molecules as seen in Unit 1. Since the sun does not at night, plants use the energy stored in the sugar synthesized during the day to stay alive. Remember that plants use sugars to build pretty much everything. Cellulose, starch, and many other sugar compounds are synthesized by plants. Now, could there be animals without plants? Could there be plants without animals? Bring your answers for discussion at the face-to-face. In review, plants breathe, so the mechanism for gaseous exchange and the structures involved in the exchange of respiratory gases were discussed. The session ended with experiments that showed that plants produce oxygen in the day.